Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hook Turn podcast. Joining me again are Vivek and Sambib, and I'm Adash, of course. So yeah, let's just get straight into it if you guys are ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on this week's show, we're going to have a look at some of our um, desired Chinese cars to come to Australia. So what our wish list is. We'll have a look at some of the initial impressions reviewers have been having around the new BMW iX3 and generally the Neue Klasse uh, platform in general. And then finally, we'll have a look at EVs versus PHEVs and just have a bit of a debate around what we prefer. So yeah, let's kick it off, guys, with Chinese cars. Obviously, they're coming thick and fast to Australia. We've got already a ton of brands here. I can't keep up with all of them, but I think there's going to be more to come as well. Given we're kind of an open playground for them at the moment. So yeah, there's a few that we still don't have here that are pretty nice over in China. I think we've got a few here that we kind of just put together. So yeah, let's kick things off. Vivek, I guess we've got the first car up. That's yours. Do you want to take us through it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try and be a salesman for this car, although I'm not sure how faithfully I can sell it, given it looks very, very similar to a car from a very famous German sports car brand. But I have to say that I think my favorite Chinese car at the moment has to be the Xiaomi SU7, especially the SU7 Ultra. So I think it's not too far of a stretch to say that, Xiaomi they're known for copying other famous brands. Not just with cars, but with all of their electronics and other smartphones and all of the other smart home devices that they've come up with. First, it was Apple, and I think for cars, they've decided that Porsche is the benchmark. So if you have a look at this design, I mean, it's a pretty close rip-off of the Porsche Taycan, especially you look at the side profile, four-door Gran Turismo type sedan, low slung roofline, the side profile in particular with the cut of the sort of the C pillar, that same sort of Porsche style curve, even the front. I think that the front, like just the profiling of the bonnet, how it sort of curves downwards, very, very Porsche Taycan. Maybe the headlights are slightly McLaren inspired, and then the tail again. Yeah, there's a little bit of difference. It's not just a straight light bar like the Taycan is, but very like it's like they had to put in maybe 5 or 10% difference just to avoid being sued by Porsche.
Yeah.
But but what is interesting is the performance, especially for the SU7 Ultra. And I think that's something that has taken quite a few people by surprise because recently it became the fastest EV around the Nürburgring. So that's a huge, huge achievement by a really like an unknown uh brand, especially in the automotive space. But what do you guys think? I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
What's the price for the non-ultra version? I think it's is it under 50K USD or something like that? Like it's pretty
Yeah,
affordable.
yeah, it's interesting. I'm not actually. Let me see what the pricing is. I'm doing some research online, and I think it's yeah, it's a
US $30,000.
US that's why. Yeah, that's why
yeah,
they've been going crazy over it. Can you
yeah,
imagine? Like what can we get for 30,000 USD here? That's what 45K here.
45, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's for the
Probably get a
entry level, yeah.
Camry or something, like
Yeah,
yeah,
agreed, yeah.
decent Camry.
Yeah.
No
yeah,
Like if
wonder.
it came here, it would probably be 55 or so, but yeah.
yeah. Well, that's the thing, and I mean, it looks really good, but and this is like you can say this for basically all of the sort of Chinese cars, and especially those from like new brands. Like the designs have been amazing, but it's just that polish and the refinement and the software experience that I would be a bit like interested to see how they sort of localize it to, Australian tastes or European tastes and so on, because Yeah, that's where there's a bit of a difference between the Chinese market and the sort of Western markets, just in that refinement and polishing of the software experience. So it does look really good on face value. And even if you look at the specs, like I'm having a look at this article from drive.com.au, and it's saying that, the base version might start at, as we discussed, over 45,000 Australian, and you'll get a 73.6 kilowatt hour LFP battery with a claimed range on the Chinese cycle of 700 kilometers. So even if you take that optimistically, and maybe like the real world range is like 500 kilometers for 45 grand, that's still very impressive. Like,
Yeah.
that's, yeah,
I
really good.
I remember, I think when it first kind of came out, obviously, the Chinese were going crazy for it, given how good value it was. But
Yeah.
then I think it was Jim Farley, CEO of Ford in the
Yes.
States. I
Yeah.
think he actually had it for a while.
Mm.
Mm.
I had it on loan, and he didn't want to give it back. It was that good. And for a CEO of a rival company to be so open about that, I think that just says it all, right? That this is something that, the other manufacturers should be worried about. Maybe not so much in the States now, with Chinese cars kind of getting hit with tariffs, so not really going to be kind of much of a threat in the near term. But I think, going forward, like there's just a sheer amount of technology, sheer amount of value that these cars can offer.
Yeah.
It's going to be very hard for these legacy car makers to compete.
Yep. We're very lucky in Australia that we have these many options because it's forcing the legacy brands to be more competitive, especially in regards to EVs. Like I suspect Hyundai, Kia with their new EVs, they wouldn't like they're still not cheap, but they could have been more expensive if they weren't having to deal with the competition from the Chinese companies here.
Yeah.
Speaking of not cheap, do you want to talk about your car, Sambit?
Yeah, so I was interested. The reality is, of course, with these S- So the Chinese car manufacturers so far have found usually success at the bottom end. I already have been reading how the Cherry Tiggo Pro 4 under 40K for so many features. They're the ones that have been sort of been super successful here. But the reality is those cars are just superficially they're nice. They present well in the showroom with all of their fancy screens, but obviously as driving cars, they're not particularly brilliant. However, Chinese car manufacturers have actually been developing cars that actually both are relatively good value for money, but also technologically and engineering wise, not probably not at the same level as the Germans or the Japanese yet, but certainly rapidly catching up. So the BYD Yangwang U9, a similar vein to Xiaomi's SU7, the supercar version of that, dedicated supercar from BYD. Unlike Xiaomi, BYD is already an established manufacturer here in Australia. So it'll be, while the price is significantly more, apparently it costs about 200 plus USD. So if it came to Australia, it'd be almost certainly 250 to 270. The fact that it's come from a brand which has actually established itself pretty quickly in less than 3 years could help. It's got an amazing design, super quick performance, supposedly um, good to drive as well. Apparently with some tricky suspension that allows it to be like adaptive, but even more adaptive, I guess. And
Can do
yeah, but
360s as well, right? I think I've seen it do, or it can jump, one of those things.
yeah, correct. It can
Yeah.
jump, drive on
Yeah.
three wheels, things like that. It's pretty amazing. Now, the reality is, and we've got one, while it's not a supercar, we've only got one car that exists in Australia, which is a really high-end Chinese car, which is the MG Cyberster. But from what I'm understanding, it's an extremely slow seller. Now, that's not a supercar, that's a Grand Tour, if you believe what MG say. So while it's quick, it's not designed to be super fast. But for Chinese cars, and not just for Chinese cars, really even for thin cars as well, Korean cars as well, as we're seeing with the Ionic 5N. Many people, once they get to the six-figure bracket, are often not going to be like, when you're spending that much money, you're not just looking for a fast car or cool-looking car, you are looking for that bit of brand credibility. And while BYD is reasonably established, most people who are shopping in a 200,000 plus price bracket where they can get a lot of Porsches or other supercars of their choice are probably not going to be looking at a BYD supercar, even if it's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the only thing that really kind of separates the big kind of legacy desirable brands at this stage. It's that brand cachet. I mean, the
Mm,
Ferraris, Lamborghinis, etc. Performance is no longer something that they can just kind of hold over. Everyone
mm,
else it seems to be getting easier and easier to break that 2.5 second, 2 second barrier, 0 to 100.
yeah,
Of course, dynamics are another thing as well. With the weight of electric supercars, I'm sure the agility isn't quite as it is for a traditional ICE supercar, but
yeah.
that's only going to improve, I think, as well with as technology continues to develop as well.
Mm.
So. Yeah, like it looks good. That ticks one of the boxes for a supercar. It's got the straight line performance. As you said, if it drives decently enough, that might be enough. But I think, yeah, if you're paying that much money, you want to kind of show it off as well. And does BYD have that brand cachet yet? Probably not, but who knows, maybe 15, 20 years. Yeah.
But I would argue that if someone were to hypothetically see it on the road, it'd probably be much more eye-catching than any of the Porsches because it really
Oh,
has a very
yeah.
distinctive design.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
I'd be interested to see a drag race between, or and even a track race between the U9 and the Xiaomi because they're both like close, they're fairly closely matched in terms of power and acceleration. I think the U9, what is it? I think it's 0 to 100. I think they claim it as 2.36 or something.
Yeah,
And then
2.36. Yep.
the Xiaomi, I think it's under 2 seconds. But so I'm interested to
It
see.
would almost depend on like the tires and
Yeah.
the reaction time of the drivers, all those sort
Yeah,
of things.
so very closely matched. But I guess to the point about like, electric supercars, I think more broadly, like they haven't been like super successful, right? Because like you look at brands with like cachet, like Maserati, for example, they had the electric Gran Turismo that sort of
Gore, yeah.
yeah, and the Fogliore, and then they had the electric. They did have an electric version of the MC20 as well that they had planned.
I think that was that also for Gore. Is that the
Yeah, I think that all
name?
the electric versions
Yeah.
are called Fogliore,
Yeah.
and then even like Alfa Romeo, they had their super bespoke 33 Stradale sort of remake. And with all three of these models, they had the choice between the customer could have an EV or they could have like a combustion engine powertrain. And from what I've heard and from what I've read, like almost like 9 in 10 or most orders have been for the combustion engine version.
I think
So
yeah. I think they
yeah.
completely canned the 33 electric as
That's right,
well.
yeah.
No one went for it.
That's right, yeah, and it's the same for the I think was it the convertible Gran Turismo or the convertible Folgore MC20. I know they canned one of the variants as well. Like they had initially said they were going to do an electric convertible electric version of maybe it was a Gran Turismo, and then they've just I think they've canned that as well. So maybe that could be what because the specs of the electric version aren't as good as the combustion engine or version, or people see that as a compromise. But I reckon it's because, at that end of the market, people want emotion, they want noise, and they're not that worried about pure 0 to 100 figure 100 kilometer an hour acceleration times and stuff. So yeah, I'd be interested to see how well this car sells if it's priced around that $200,000 mark or so. So
I saw an interview with Horacio Pagani the other day, and
yeah,
you would have thought, given their kind of history, pedigree, he'd be staunchly against EV supercars, but he
yeah,
was kind of open to it. He was like, yeah, the market at the moment clearly shows that it's not a desirable powertrain for this level of car.
yeah.
But he said, if it changes, they will be open to exploring an EV supercar or hypercar,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, look, at the moment, as you said, it looks like the market is saying that they don't want to go in this direction, or the majority at least.
yeah,
But as soon as it slightly starts to change, and you see some of these more legacy brands trying to come on board and tap into their history and bring whatever made them great, apart from the powertrain, the attention to detail, the craftsmanship, for example, of Pagani, and
mm,
bring it to an EV powertrain. Maybe
mm,
that's the catalyst to make them desirable as well.
yeah. It'll definitely be interesting, but I reckon if Pagani decides to do an EV, like they have so much expertise in combustion engines, and even like I mean, their expertise in like is in like materials and exotic design and chassis materials, and I mean, they've been using engines from Mercedes. I'm sure if they decide to do an EV, they'd probably reach out to maybe Remarch or some supercar EV supplier. They wouldn't probably do it in-house. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what how that goes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I think Adash, you had your
Yeah,
favorite Chinese car?
yeah,
Yeah,
Yang.
so I think it's probably a step down in terms of the excitement level of a Yang Wang and a Su 7 Ultra. Paltry, what is it? 3.9 seconds to 100. So yeah,
So quick.
yeah, that's positively pedestrian, isn't it? 3.9 seconds. Wow. But no, I chose the Neo ET5 Touring. One ET5 because it's a nice compact size, but I think, the wagon, it's a rarity these days, and this is one damn good looking wagon, I
Mm,
think. But
yeah,
yeah, the one reason I wanted to bring the 85 to the conversation is the Neo brand in general. I want to see that Neo brand here. Like
mm,
for a long time, we haven't had that real kind of premium, kind of desirable Chinese brand here, and I think it's starting to change now that Aussie consumers are a little bit more familiar and they might be more receptive to it, and maybe would be open to paying a little bit of a price premium, but from whatever I've seen, Neo they do things well, right?
yeah.
The
They've got the changeable battery,
they
the
got the
battery
changeable
swap.
battery. Yeah, they're innovating, right? So they've got battery swap stations all over China. I'm not sure they'd quite be able to bring that here when we struggle to even set up chargers in Australia, but I think it shows that they're more than just, another car manufacturer. They're trying to innovate and push themselves. And I've always liked how their interiors have looked as well. There seems to be a real kind of attention to detail and quality there. Even though it's minimalist, like all of them, there seems to be a bit of character. And there's that, I don't know if you guys have seen that Nomi AI kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I was just going to comment on that. What are your thoughts, Adash, on the interior? Because it's like what is it, like a spherical like AI like sort of ball type thing that's perched on the top of the dashboard and has like blinking eyes and stuff. Like it's
I love
hilarious.
it. Yeah, I love it. Obviously, it needs to work well. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you'd be pretty frustrated with it
yeah,
after a short period of time. But I love it. It adds a bit of personality, right? It's not
yeah.
a robot voice just kind of
Yeah.
screaming the wrong kind of
Yeah.
instructions to you. It might still scream the wrong instructions to you, but at least it does it with a
Yeah.
bit of flair. So that's what I like about it.
As
But
long
yeah,
as it's not too creepy.
exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to point out Neo. I guess it's a bit of a wild card. Some of these other cars that I have put here are from your traditional manufacturers, and I think some of these cars that are Chinese exclusive from the likes
Mm.
of Ford, Toyota. So Ford, I've highlighted the Mondeo Sport. It's called now. It used to be called the Evos, and then we've got the Toyota BZ7. There's also the BZ5, which is ridiculously good value, but that's another topic. And then Audi, Capital Audi, which is
Yes.
the weirdest sub-brand I've heard of in my life, but somehow that's what they've decided to call their Audi sub-brand in China. I think it's a joint venture with one of the companies. I honestly think this Audi looks better than the current generation of new Audi. I think it looks more resolved, and inside it's a little bit of a screen fest. So, but I still think actually design-wise, inside and out, it's a little bit more sophisticated. So. Yeah, I actually think, especially Ford, Ford could use some real kind of new products here in Australia that aren't named, the Ranger or a range of variants. And I think they could look to China to bring some of these cars here that genuinely look like they're at least competitive, and they could kind of bring back some of the buyers that were once loyal to Ford but have now moved to other brands.
How has the Mustang Mach-E been doing? I don't in Australia at least. I don't see them too often.
I've
No,
not seen one. Yeah, I've not
Yeah.
seen any really.
Mm.
I'm having a look at this Audi. I think it's called the A5 Sportback. And yeah,
Yeah,
it does look like it from the outside, like it looks I agree with you, Adash. Like in terms of like if you look at it compared to, what are the models that we're gonna get, the new A6 e-tron Sportback. I think it's a much cleaner design. It's not like as fussy as the as the normal A6. But then you look at the interior, and I guess you can see why it's sort of China only,
Yep.
because like China is just I mean, they're obsessed with their screens and so on. Like this is like a wall-to-wall screen experience. Like it's a bit like it's a lot.
It's too much, yeah.
Yeah.
I that's exactly the reason why I like the exterior though. It feels
Yeah.
classic Audi, pared back, but
Mm.
stylish and not over the top
Yeah.
and fussy like the current models have got going.
Yeah.
Especially yeah, some of the e-tron models.
Mm.
Interior, I actually like the design language.
Mm.
I think the current interior design language of European Audis, they're way off the mark. They're nowhere near as nice as they used to be. But as you
Mm.
said, it's a bit of a screen fest. So
Yeah.
they could pare that back a little bit and bring some of this to the other kind of traditional international Audi models. I think it would be a big step forward compared to what they're bringing out at the moment. But yeah, it looks like it might be just Chinese exclusive because it's a joint venture at the moment.
Yeah. That's right. I think it's a joint venture with SAIC, which is also the owner of MG. So that's interesting, and uh, it's ironic because like it has a more classy styling on the outside, but then they don't actually have the four rings anymore. It's just the Audi logo. So it's like it's more traditional in some ways, and it's more toned down. But then they've swapped out the four rings for just Audi lettering. So that's an interesting
Yeah,
design choice. But yeah.
yeah. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
So BMW, they're going to go through a bit of a brand reboot, probably later this year with the Neue Klasse range of products. So I think the first cab off the rank is going to be the new iX3, and there have been some early impressions from some motoring journalists. They've had a taste of the prototypes, and yeah, by all reports, it looks like it might be a winner, although very kind of different in terms of styling compared to the current range. But that might be a good thing depending on who you are. So yeah, I think Vivek, you've been following this pretty closely. Do you want to give us a rundown?
Yeah, I've been reading some of the reviews and have had a look at some of the pictures, and especially you read some of the reviews from the British motoring media. So, Autocar, Auto Express, Top Gear have all been surprisingly positive. And so this is like the new what BMW is calling the sixth gen EV platform. And Neue Klasse, it's quite a big claim because Neue Klasse is a reference back to the 1960s, really, when BMW decided to introduce an entirely new type of vehicle that would eventually become the 5 Series. So, and it marked sort of like a to the as the name sort of implies, new class. It marks sort of like a step change in technology and driving and so on. So that reference is basically BMW is putting a bit of a marker in the sand that's saying this is like going to be a step change in our electric vehicles, and not just in terms of the powertrain technology, but also in terms of things like the design. It's a sort of a new design language with the and it looks like most of the photos that we've seen so far are camouflage, but we've had a look at the Vision Neue Classic concepts, and you can still sort of tell, like from a general sense, that it's a lot sort of like the smoother design. The front grill is a lot more wider. It's less fussy, more sort of integrated, more of a wider stance. Very sort of EV taking advantages of that of the platforms and the packaging benefits that an EV sort of drivetrain can give you. So yeah, and I guess the other step change is that it also introduces an entirely new HMI design, or human machine interface design, for BMW. So they've gotten entirely rid of the, iDrive rotary controller. They've gotten rid of that, even like a proper instrument cluster. It's now they're calling it a panoramic iDrive iDrive concept. So you have like a uh, in front behind you, or not behind you, in front of you, you have this sort of like almost not a heads up display, but you have this like wall to wall sort of instrument sort of panel that is very like far away, but very sort of aligned to like the windscreen, and then next to you you have this big infotainment system. So those are the two sort of main components, and then I think there's an optional augmented reality head-up display that as well. So it's a very interesting concept, but I think the proof will be in the pudding when customers can take it for a spin and test drive it. But the media reviews have been very positive, and the specs that they're touting, like 800 kilometers of range, 800-volt electrical architecture, very fast DC charging, cell to pack technology as well. So the battery is more of a structural component of the vehicle. Really good dynamic impressions. That is, reviewers are saying that the everything from the smoothness of the braking to the handling to the steering, all world class. So yeah, very very positive impressions, and it could be a bit of a game changer for the BMW brand, and even the segment that the iX3 competes in.
You'd have to say BMW are leading the charge in terms of EVs compared to the rest of the Germans, I think. Like
Audi have the PPF, I guess, that they're developing with
Yeah.
Porsche.
PPE, yeah.
Oh yeah, PP, yeah.
Yeah.
PPF.
Yeah. Sorry, Sam, if you go ahead, you wanted to say
Oh
something.
yeah, yeah. But other than that, it's pretty clear. Yes, BMW have. It's why I believe their EVs have been far more successful than either Audi or Mercedes, even before this new generation of vehicles. Even the previous, well, I guess current before the new one, Gen iX1, iX3 have been far more successful. They've been good at balancing that. They still have the relatively conventional looks with pretty good electrical sort of features. Whereas from what I understand, Mercedes certainly has been struggling a lot more to move a lot of their electric cars. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, in our family, we've got an i4, and I mean, not that I've driven a whole lot of EVs, but as far as this particular one goes, it drives beautifully. It's like one of the best driving cars that I've ever experienced. Like, it's pretty heavy. It's over 2 tons. It's pretty long as well, but it feels small, and it's just super easy to drive, and it's super smooth and refined. So they're clearly doing something right. I mean, the downside of it is that it's based on a common
Mm.
architecture with the 4 Series, so the packaging is pretty poor. There's basically like no leg room. Even in the front, you're struggling for leg room, at least if you're the passenger. And if you're at the back, you got no chance. And you got a huge bonnet for a non-existent engine. And all is just there's no frunk or anything. It's just electrical components. So, moving to a dedicated platform, you're going to see packaging improvements with the i3 and the next gen. I guess i3 is what they would call it, I suppose, as well. Even though the previous i3 was a weird little hatchback thing, so that's a bit
Mm.
odd that they're probably going to reboot that name a little bit. But yeah, I could see that they're going to have another kind of winner on their hands in terms of how it drives. It's just BMW's DNA. But if they can combine with packaging, as you said, Vivek, 800-kilometer range, is there anything in Australia that's even close to that at the moment? I don't know for EVs. So yeah, I think it's going to be a winner, and it certainly seems like it from the initial impressions.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to seeing this on the road. Like, yeah, definitely. It looks like it has a really good design, incredible technology, very refined. And I know Sandra was mentioning that sort of, the Volkswagen Group, especially Audi and Porsche, has introduced that PPE platform, and like it's interesting. Like you see, like the Macan has come out, and the new sort of Q6 e-tron has come out, both based on that platform, like and I feel like the design for all of the PPE cars, it still sort of has some of the issues, in my opinion, that like the MEB based cars had, like the ID4 and the ID ID3, maybe more so. It's still like very like it's too rounded, and it just feels too like I think the best way to phrase it is like the floor of the car seems too high. Like
It
you look
look
at the,
fat. It look
yeah,
heavy.
it looks fat. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way to try it. It looks fat. Like you look at the ICE Macan, like the combustion engine Macan, and then you look at the PPE based Macan, and it looks like they've they've just had to fatten it up a little bit. Like it's just like the proportions just seem a little bit off.
Think it's
And it's
missing a wing. Like it feels like it's missing a wing at the back, the Macan
yeah,
EV. Like it's
and
like
it's too
cut off, but
tall.
very blunt, like just a very
Yeah.
sawn off rear end. It feels like it's missing something to plant it properly.
Yeah, and it just feels too tall. It's like they've gotten like an image of the combustion engined Macan, and then they've like opened it in Microsoft, like in Photoshop or Microsoft Paint or something, and then they've increased, like they've vertically stretched it a little bit. It's just, um, yeah, I think the design and the proportions are just a little bit off with the PPE cars, and you can say that the same thing with the MEB cars as well. And then you look at, you know, Mercedes and what they did with like the EQE, the EQE SUV. I think they when they had their EQ branding that they're sort of moving away from now. But you know, EQS, EQE, and it's like a lozenge, like a jelly
The
bean shape.
blobs. Yeah, the blobs
Yeah,
on wheels. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like people don't want to sort of like necessarily maybe virtue signal is not the right way to phrase it, but they don't want to sort of shout out that, you know, I have an EV and it necessarily has to be like a lozenge because, you know, it offers better aerodynamics and stuff. And like people just want something that looks good, like full stop, right? And this car, like, you know, it's more conventionally shaped. It still has all the range that you need. It seems like it's going to look good. And I'm really keen for the new 3 Series or the i3, as Adash was saying, that is going to be based off this platform and as a sedan. I think it's going to, you know, it's if it retains all of the technology and the specifications, I think it's going to do very well. So
Yeah, I've seen the M3 EV or the i3M, whatever they're going to call it. I've seen them
yeah.
on the Nürburgring, and man,
Mm.
that thing looks quick. Like it's going to be quicker
Oh,
probably than the combustion engine M3. I'm sure they're going to
definitely.
have both versions still because of
Yeah.
otherwise there's going to be plenty of backlash if they go full EV for now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think performance wise, like these are going to overtake IC pretty quickly. And
Mm.
I think that might be
Possible.
what kind of converts people, like at least the ones that want to go the fastest. But
Mm.
yeah, I guess time will tell whether they'll ever do a kind of full transition or if they'll go kind of both this two-pronged strategy that they've been doing for a while where they've got the same kind of car, but they've
Mm,
got an EV version or a combustion engine version.
Mm.
mm. They might
And
also go dual with a hybrid or a PHEV
yeah,
if because BMW has a few PHEVs, if I'm correct.
yeah, and this won't, to my knowledge, this is not going to replace the new X3. Like I think they're going to sell this alongside the new X3, which just came out. So if they can sort of keep the pricing, I mean, relatively on par, like I reckon this will easily start sort of over 6 figures. But if they can sort of keep it maybe around the 110K mark, 120K mark starting. I think it'll be a tough. I mean, I'd get as long as I didn't have to travel like huge distances or anything. As a day-to-day sort of everyday car, I'd get this over the new X3, like the combustion engine X3. So yeah,
Pricing might be sharp because the i4 with the eDrive 35, I think is only in the 80s now, early 80s.
yeah. So
You might
that's
see this
true.
kind of be around the
Sneaking under
100K
100.
mark.
Yeah, might start 99,990 or
Oh
something.
yeah, great value, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sorry, you were talking about the interior. We didn't get to touch on it a little bit. I don't know what's going on with this four-prong steering wheel. Not the
yeah.
biggest fan of that, but yeah, the little eyebrow panoramic display. We've actually seen this in Xiaomi. Xiaomi kind of beat BMW to the punch with the U7, YU7 SUV, which has a similar kind of technology. So from what I've seen, it's a projection on the screen. It's not actually a screen, right? I think it's projecting onto a black background, and yeah, like it sits in the kind of driver's eye line a
Hmm.
little bit. So it's almost like a heads-up display. Although I understand they've got a heads-up display and they've got a central screen. So again, it
Yeah.
could be kind of too much screen going on.
I reckon it's a better approach than what Mercedes are doing with like the, you know, super screen and their hyper screen and just like literally have like 3 huge screens in front of you. And even like Audi with the new PPE cars and the like they just have like this optional front passenger side screen, and then they have like two screens, and that seems like I don't know. I feel like BMW have taken a more thoughtful approach. Like it's not as it doesn't seem as overwhelming and as those options like from the other Germans, but it's TBC how well it will work in practice as well. So it's an interesting approach, definitely. I think it's a little bit more restrained, I would say, slightly more restrained than the other Germans. They've sort of taken like the, easy way. Let's just plonk three screens on the dashboard and call it a day type thing.
Oh, the Audi integration, it's oh, it just literally looks like they've plonked it.
Yeah.
The passenger display, it's
Yeah.
not integrated at all. I don't know what they were
Yeah.
thinking there. So at least
Yeah.
it's integrated.
Yeah.
Sam, but what do you think about the setup?
I think ultimately a lot of these interiors, before even with the current gens, you could tell a BMW if you remove the badge hypothetically from the steering wheel. Lots of if you know cars, of course, you'd be able to tell that, yep, this is most likely a BMW interior. Whereas, yes, this new interior looks nice, but if I took out the BMW badge, I could be like, oh yeah, this is the interior of one of the new Chinese car brands, or really any car brand that maybe was a bit more premium, but nothing about it screams classic BMW. It feels yes, it's got some cool tech, and yes, it's got a better, like more sophisticated versions of what Mercedes-Benz have been doing with their hyperscreens, etc. But really, if you took out the BMW badge, it does nothing in the design suggests that it could be a BMW inside.
100%. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they're trying their best on the outside to bring back some of the 80s vibes from
Mm.
that era with the kind of black top grille section there and the vertical kidney grills. But yeah, in the inside, it could be any brand. They've really just thrown everything out the door and just started afresh. So I agree with you. I think they probably should try and bring something back from the early days and yeah, otherwise, what separates them from any old brand? Even if it kind of looks nice technology-wise, I think you still want that connection to the brand and the heritage going inside and out.
I thought the current gen iX3, one of the reasons why it's popular is because it's that good blend of still buttons, well, with still a touchscreen, which is why, it still reviews quite well. Where, but if BMW also goes to everything's on the screen, there's no, or basically no hard buttons, and they're basically becoming the same as every other manufacturer that can basically do that.
Yeah,
And it's like, BMW, their tagline has always been the ultimate driving machine, right? And they've always, traditionally stood for being sporty and more driver focused. And the classic BMW interiors, to what Sanbib and Adash were saying, they're always like you could tell like the center console was always tilted slightly towards the driver.
Mm, yeah.
Things like that. And I think they've tried to like, here they have this like weird like hexagonal display that's sort of like it's maybe a rhombus is the best way to sort of describe it. And it's like almost like it's not really slanted or angled towards the driver, but it's like the way it's sort of like, there's two sort of and parallel lines are vertically sort of leaning towards the driver a little bit. So maybe in a very, very small way they've tried to keep that, but not really. Like it's just like it's still like a screen that they've instead of making it rectangular, they've just sort of like cut the angles a little bit so it's a little bit more like angle like tilted towards the driver in a sense, but it's not like that pure, we've angled this center console 7 degrees so it looks like it's more driver focused and so on. It doesn't have that same level of classiness and timelessness that the classic BMW interiors did.
right.
Definitely.
Definitely not. All right, let's move on to the final topic. All right, we've already spoken a hell of a lot about EVs today. You got a couple of kind of PHEV models running around Australia. I think BMW, the latest X3, they've got a plug-in and they've got they're obviously coming out with an iX3 as well. So yeah, let's have a little bit of a debate, guys, around kind of what we kind of think. Is it best to go full EV? Does it make more sense to go PHEV in Australia at least with the kind of lack of charging infrastructure? So yeah, Sambib, do you want to kick things off and give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I think especially now, given that lots of manufacturers are realizing this rush towards going fully electric has been a bit too premature, that general public is not necessarily ready for a full EV future. Yes, there's always going to be people on the cutting edge, but a lot of mainstream consumers are still hesitant about purchasing full EVs, even though I will say that a lot of their hesitations are based on not necessarily the most well-found facts. Like there's always this fear that, oh, I'm going to be stranded on the side of the road, with no range. But the reality is, unless if you are incredibly poor at planning, first, the most basic cars, unless if you're buying the absolute budget cars, can usually do 300 to 400 Ks at the very least, if not more, one charge. And very few people are driving that much on a regular basis. And on top of that, while Australia doesn't have the infrastructure that other countries do, in general, we still have enough charging spots across the major sort of highways that link our major cities, like between Sydney and Melbourne, Sydney, Newcastle, Sydney, Brisbane, etc. However, the reality is, of course, is that people will still always have that fear. And yes, it is sometimes true, even if the charging stations do exist, they're either out of action, they're already full, especially during peak holiday periods, etc. So the idea here is that PHEVs is that balance where I think the average car journey in Australia is well under 100 kilometers a day. Like most people driving to and back from work are not doing 100 Ks, right? Maybe at most 40, 50, even that's if you live really far from your job. Um, so PHEV seems like that great balance where you have the advantage of obviously EVs, where 90% of your day-to-day driving, especially during Monday to Friday, can be covered with your PHEV. On top of that, unlike with dedicated EVs, because they've got smaller batteries, you can basically charge them from a three-point plug and you don't need like a dedicated charger. So that also eliminates that hassle. So you can use that, and then on the weekend, if supposedly you're doing an extremely long run drive every weekend, which again most people are not, you at least have that assurance of having that petrol engine backup. And lots of the newer PHEVs are effectively converted into a hybrid, where basically the electric motor assists the petrol motor. So even when the petrol motor is theoretically running, the fuel efficiency is like basically like as of a hybrid. So it's a good basically middle ground. And I think more and more manufacturers are introducing BEVs. For a while, it was like Mitsubishi Outlander and the Eclipse Cross, weirdly enough, that was reasonably popular. But now we're seeing more and more mainstream manufacturers introducing it. The BYD C-Line 6, the 7 is a full EV, I believe. It's probably the best all-round version, but obviously there are more and more brands that are embracing it.
Yeah, I think we were looking at, what is it, 330e before getting the i4, and then I think there was the X3 plug-in as well, and the Lexus NX 450h.
Mhm.
I'll give you about the back then the usable driving range for those fares was 50 kilometers, 40 kilometers, and if you don't charge, a FEV car, all you've got is a compromised petrol motors carrying around, batteries. So I think if we move towards these kind of cars that have a better kind of driving range on pure electric, where it makes sense for more people, where you've got at least that 100K driving range and you remember to charge it, it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. What I like though is I think Scout in the States, they're not out yet, but VW's brand, they've got a range extender for an EV. So it's primarily an EV, but then you can fill up the petrol tank and then kind of extend the range if you need to. That's kind of my preference, I feel. I feel like that's the best balance between both if you need to kind of use that in emergency. So lean more towards electric and have the backup if you need it rather than having a little bit of electric range and a lot of petrol where and if you don't use the electric you don't actually charge the battery, then you've got a compromised kind of petrol car. But yeah, I think maybe in Australia like it's improving charging infrastructure. I think yeah, my dad tried to travel from Sydney to Melbourne and Melbourne to Sydney, and he said never again. So I don't think it's quite there at the moment. But yeah, if we start to kind of keep building out, electric charging stations, especially on longer distances, longer drives, EV probably will make more and more sense for more people, unless you're really going to be doing those long distances on a day-to-day basis.
What would you guys personally choose? Either an EV or a plug-in hybrid?
At the moment, I would go EV still at the
Okay.
moment. if the driving range for the usable electric drive range is around 100, 150 for most of the PHEVs, then maybe I'll be swayed. But
Mm.
yeah, for now, the current state of the market, I'll go EV.
What about you, Sandy?
I'd probably go EV as well, in the sense that if I think about my current driving habits, I don't often go on long distance journeys. And most longer distance journeys I'd go on would be covered with the 400 plus K range that most modern day EVs have. However, obviously, if didn't live in Sydney and lived out in the country where charging options are a bit less limited, and obviously people drive longer distances, PHEVs would definitely make more sense. But for my current driving habits, I figured that an EV will probably be enough, a longer range EV,
Mm.
because yeah, I'm like PHEVs, while obviously have their appeal, I would say yes, a full EV will just be easier, longer range on full electric charge. And yeah, in general, I trust charging enough for the very few times a year I would even do a long distance drive in like that would be long enough to need to be charging along the way.
Yeah,
What
that's
about you, Vic?
yeah. I reckon I'm gonna disagree with both of you. I reckon I'd stick with the Fev to be honest. I do not have Sandbib's faith in electric vehicle charging infrastructure just because I've heard and seen so many nightmare stories, especially, and this is especially the case if you don't have a Tesla or you have an EV that is not compatible with the Tesla supercharger network, where, you know, yes, theoretically you have all of these charging stations and plugs and power points, but how many of them are firstly going to be operational? And then secondly, how busy are they going to be? Because I'm thinking about, I have one car, and if I want to go on a Christmas road trip or a holiday road trip down to the Great Ocean Road, or if I want to drive up to Sydney, um, you know, everybody during the holiday period, especially you have school holidays, you have the Christmas break, you have the Easter break, long weekends, everybody is going to be having the same line of thinking and they're going to be charging at the same stops. And it's not like a petrol station yet where it's like a quick 5 minute top up. You go in and out, pay, you leave. With these EV charging stations, it depends on the speed of the charging infrastructure. It depends on how fast your actual EV can accept it. And then the other problem is if you start having multiple cars that are simultaneously charging, then the actual speed of the infrastructure will go down as well. So there's a lot of factors where you could potentially have a big backlog, and if it gets busy, and then everybody charges more slowly as well. So for me, I think PHEV is the way to go. Like I'm especially looking forward to the RAV4 plug-in hybrid. And I know we've talked about this in one of our earlier episodes. I think it was the first episode, but that to me, 100 kilometer sort of quoted range, maybe the realistic range, given that's on WLTP cycle, realistic range might be 70, 80 kilometers. But even then, that's, Monday to Friday, perfectly, use it as an EV. Yes, you do have to remember to charge it up, but come home, plug it into your 3-pin socket. Don't need to worry about a huge, wall charge box or anything. And then when you're going to your road trips, you can bypass all of those worries about having to find the right charging station or having to worry about how busy the charging station is or whether it's actually functional. You can just easy drive up to Sydney or down the Great Ocean Road, and you just have that peace of mind. I think is a big thing for me. So yeah, I don't know if I've convinced you, but PHEV for me.
Let's just skip them all and go straight to hydrogen. I'll get the hero.
Yeah, but then hydrogen is like how many
The
refueling
one
stations
charging
are there?
station.
One, yeah, that
Yes.
Toyota
Although
owns,
I
and
have
then
seen some Mirais around for some reason, even in
yeah,
Melbourne, so I don't know
yeah.
how they're actually filling up.
I think they use so from my experience at Toyota, there's in Melbourne, there's two refueling stations. There's the Toyota one, which is semi-publicly accessible. Like you have to basically, let Toyota know that you're going to fill up, and it's, you can't do it on weekends, and it's during business hours and stuff. And then there's the smaller CSIRO refueler, which is actually near, I believe it's near Monash University's Clayton campus. And I'm not actually sure how
Oh, oh yeah,
publicly available
I
that
think we've
is.
seen that. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I actually walked by once. Yeah. Okay, that,
Yeah.
that one makes sense. That's why I'm seeing summarize around.
And I think in Sydney, I know Hyundai at their headquarters in Macquarie Park, I believe they have a refueling station, but I'm not even sure if that's publicly accessible or if they're just doing that for they have their Nexo fleet of vehicles, and I think they just I'm not even sure if you can like if you as a random member of the public can actually rock up and say, "Hey, I want to fill up my hydrogen vehicle." I don't think you can do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think this confusion says it all that probably Toyota is doing the right thing at the moment with that
Yeah.
diversified strategy and kind of covering all bases. No one
Yeah.
really has a strong preference at the moment. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even like you look at like for this is a niche brand but like Persia, they have the E3000 and maybe not the E3008, but they have the E408 and then they have the 308. They both have plug-in hybrids. I've not seen like any PHEVs from Persia, but that might not be because of the technology. It might just be because nobody really like not cares, but like nobody really has faith in the French brands or they haven't really done much marketing around it or whatnot. But
Yeah, it's all a bit irrelevant at the moment.
yeah.
I think they're
Yeah.
really struggling to make any ground.
Mm.
All right, a good debate. Thanks, guys. So yeah, that wraps it up for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Hook Turn. And yeah, if you missed our F1 segment this week, we'll be back next week with the Canadian GP.
That's right.
So
Looking forward to that. Yeah.
see you then.
Well, thank you.